Welcome to the Well-Led Podcast, where we understand human leaders and the need to balance professionalism and imperfection. I'm your host, Kate Johnson. We're working our way through key skills that make leading well possible, and I hope you can see the lesson across this month's episodes. Leader and employee success begins with a foundation of care, and then requires that we provide concrete practical support, clear expectations, and other guide rails to understand the work and what results are necessary. And this depends on leaders who can master clarity, the skill of consistently illuminating connections and purpose. I'm joined today by a leader in the field of learning and development. And while I may have some bias, I do believe that this is a field of work where clarity is always a priority. So welcome, Christy. Thank you so much for joining me today. Let's take a moment so you can introduce yourself, please.
Hi, Kate. Thanks for having me. And like you said, I am in learning and development. That's not where I started. I started in marketing operations. I had a degree in marketing, thought I should be a teacher, but I had an advisor who wisely said, "You have just paid for a degree in marketing. Why don't you start a career in marketing and see if that's what you want to do? You can always go back if you want to be a teacher, but try to get some experience before you continue on in your education." So they've lucked into a growing company, continued to add more and more learning and development responsibilities to my role, and almost 14 years ago, made learning and development my full-time position. I'm at a smaller, mid-size organization. So really anything related to learning and development comes across my desk some way, somehow. So everything from onboarding to succession planning will cross my desk.
Yeah, that's an exciting array of types of learning that you get to have your hands on. I love your personal story, Christy, of how you went from, I'm going to be a teacher to, marketing. I feel like that is a story of clarity. A mentor, a leader in your life, and the function of that counselor was able to say, okay, let's take a look at what your choices are and what might be best for you right now. That's what we're talking about today. Here's where we've come from, here's where we're going. What will it take to get us to the next thing is the function of clarity. As I said, I'd like to have you tell us about a time where you've had lack of clarity at work or in your goals, and what the implication of that low clarity was for you personally.
The biggest moment I can think of was one I just mentioned in that story there. The time when I was transitioning from being a project manager training role to the full-time training position. It was when I was coming back from my parental leave with my first kiddo.
Yeah.
He was a preemie, and I had adopted him. So way back in 2012, adoption leave was not a thing. So I took as much unpaid leave as I felt comfortable taking. And then I had to come back to work and leave my son with a perfect stranger. And his sitter was great. That family treated him like another son in the family, but a huge amount of change going on in my personal life. Then I come back to work, and it was everything I had been asking for a number of years. I was going into a full-time learning and development role. That also meant there were no guidelines into what I was coming back into. In my project management role, I had a client saying, "I want this done. I want this done by this deadline. And here are the parameters of that." In my learning and development role, I was having to figure out, what am I going to do? When is it going to be done? And how is that connecting to our company's bigger goals? this is a lot of work that's similar to what leaders do on a regular basis. You go from being a practitioner to somebody that's having to have a lot of thinking time in your role. And when you get into a spot where you have a lot of thinking time in your role, there's a lot of time to think about things outside of your role. Like, oh, what would it take for me to be a stay-at-home mom? What would I need to do? How could I reapply my skills?
Yeah.
I feel like that could happen at any type of change, whether it's a personal change, a career change. And I had 2 big changes going on.
Very big.
Life.
Very big. Those are 2 significant life changes. And it highlights something really important, I think, that there are 2 things that I made note of. The first is we have to pay attention to what may be happening to employees outside of work. Because a stressor, even if it's something as positive as having a new child in your life, or a new house, or getting married, anything that creates change or disruption or distraction for your team in their personal life is going to impact their ability to get clear about things, to comprehend and consume information you're giving them. And then the issue of ambiguity, which we just live with now. Change is no longer a thing that we really look forward to and plan for. It is the way of doing work anymore, constantly accelerating, I would say, over the last 10, 20 years. So recognizing that ambiguity is going to create not just a barrier to comprehension, but it also is a filter that you have to account for in your own communication to people. And recognizing too that those factors, what's going on personally, what's going on in the workplace, may have an impact on people's productivity too.
I love you talking about the filter piece of it. We had it was in our feedback training, but I use this anytime we're talking about communication. Give a shout out to Kate Siegel. She was a counterpart at another organization we work closely with. I stole her slide and used it for years. We called it the most high-tech slide that ever existed, but it had 2 faces on it. And the person on the one side had a green square in their head, and this little green square traveled across the slide and came out, I think, as a red triangle and went into the other person's head as a yellow circle. And so we were talking about anytime you communicate, you try and get green square to green square, and you're thinking about all those other things going on in somebody's head of, what am I going to make for dinner? Is my kid being taken care of? What is my client going to say about this? I've got these 10 different goals I'm trying to achieve. So trying to get your message across, get that green square to green square in the mess of everything going on in the middle of that, in between those 2 people, is very, very hard.
Because both sides of that exchange of communication, exchange of information, have all of that going on. So you may think I started with green square, but by the time it leaves you to the point of Kate's beautiful slide, it starts green square, but gets morphed into red triangle by the time it leaves your mouth. Communicate. The fact that people are able to communicate with any connection and understanding is really kind of miraculous to begin with. Then thinking about the effort that goes in to clarity and confirmation of understanding. Because as we're talking, that's one of the things that occurs to me, is that clarity isn't just speaking the message and understanding it yourself. You've got to close that loop to make certain we're both green squaring as we go. This feels like a pretty obvious question, But I think it bears asking nonetheless. When a leader lacks clarity, what is the effect on the team?
It's very hard on the team when the leader lacks clarity, because I guess it can vary situation to situation, but the team can stall out if there's no overall purpose from a grander standpoint. Because if you look at Gallup, they say that you should have the company purpose that funnels down to the team's purpose that funnels down to the individual's purpose. Yeah. So everybody needs to be heading in the same direction, because you can burn yourself out so quick if you're trying to do all these little things and you don't know why you're doing them.
Exactly.
It all needs to tie together. But then there are simple things where we have a team charter that we work off of. And one of the things my leader and I were doing, if we had a big update, to us, it made sense. We are buried in our email. If we have a big update, we're going to just put it out on Teams, because things get lost in our email. It might take us a few days, a week to respond to something in email. So if a big update happens, we're just going to throw it out in Teams. And we were sitting in our team charter meeting that we have every year, and I'll pause. Team charter, center of the team charter is our purpose.
Yeah.
Around the purpose, we talk about our ways of working. So what are we going to do when we're in person together? So what are we doing collaboratively? What are we going to do if we are in person but working separately? So we're all in the same location, but we're working separately. What can we do if we are hybrid? So we're all in different locations. Maybe we're joining on a Teams meeting, but we can be in separate locations to do it. And what are we going to do completely alone? So what do we not need to be together for? What are the things that we can put our heads down and do completely separately? Yeah. And then it has other things on our team norms of team norms. What are the things we celebrate? What are the ways we build psychological safety? So we were having our annual review. And we were talking about how we communicate, what goes in email, what goes on Teams, what goes in shared documents, that kind of thing. And our team said, we really can't stand how many times you ping us throughout the day. And so they were like, things just get lost there. It's like whispering it in the wind. It goes on Teams and it's gone. Because there was so much information funneling out there. They were like, we want it in email, because then we can save it and go back and reference it. And it was one of those aha moments of, thank you for sharing that with us. We needed to understand that your ways of working were different than our ways of working. We were trying to get information out quickly, making sure that it didn't get lost. And in our ways of doing it, it was getting lost.
Yeah.
And not getting followed. So the clarity was getting lost. Our green square was not green squaring the way we thought it was.
Yeah. And that is such a leadership victory when people tell you, when people have the courage and feel safe enough to say what you're doing isn't working. Even with the letdown, what a wonderful moment for you as a leadership team.
So I think it's everything from the big things of people burning themselves out for not understanding the purpose, to the really small ways of working of you're just doing the right things in the wrong ways.
Yes. I thank you for bringing up Gallup's work, because I feel like that the way we think of it for the team, what's the mission, the team's purpose, the worker's purpose, I think that's mirrored in the process that a leader needs to take in order to get clear. How do you develop clarity in leadership? And I believe it happens through a process of beginning with, what is my purpose here to lead, specifically at this company, this team, kind of work through that, and then look at what is my team's purpose? What is our function here, and what goals do we have to accomplish? And then what is the mission of the organization? And have I appropriately slotted everything in so it fits the mission? Now, that's not necessarily sequential. It can start with organizational mission, but you have to begin with, what is my purpose? That sets the template. It strikes a template for everything that comes after. And when you know what your team is there to do, you can hold that up as the light, if you will, because illuminating things is so important in clarity, to help your employees recognize, this is my purpose within part of that. That's why it's so vital that you be able to talk about not just the what we're here to do, but why it connects, how it connects to the bigger picture, regardless of what the mission is of the organization. Even when the mission is something that seems easy to embrace. Having worked in healthcare, that was something that I think some leaders struggled to understand, that they needed to still talk about the mission, because there was this assumption of like, well, everyone's here for the same purpose. We care for people. Yes, and you have to keep talking about it. And you have to anchor every expectation in a logical way to that purpose that we all have. Even the most mundane tasks, can you connect it to, here's what we're all here to do. Our team contributes in this way. You contribute to our team's success in this fashion. And that's that, I think, very logical way to connect daily tasks to big picture that unfortunately I think a lot of people take for granted that folks are just going to understand. They should just know. Well, the only way they just know, and you know that they just know, is if you tell them.
There's a book, and I'm going to forget who the author is, which my apologies to the author, but it's called Find Love in What You Do.
Oh.
And so it talks about how nurses and teachers should have the clearest purpose there is out there.
Mm-hmm.
But they have the highest burnout of most professions out there. And it talks about finding that red thread and pulling on it. So I think one of the things with understanding your purpose and understanding your role that you play in all of this is, and where you fit into the big picture and why that is so important, is that you're not going to love everything you do. Like, I don't want to go have a hard conversation with somebody. Like, I had to tell somebody something that was hard and somewhat embarrassing, and I don't want to do that.
Right?
Like, that doesn't bring me joy. But it's finding love in what you do. Like, I want to make everybody future ready. Like, we say we hire the best. I want to give you the tools and resources so that you continue to be the best.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that is my purpose. And that is why I come to work every day. And that is why I overload myself with information and continue to funnel and filter through it and get it out there. But the other thing Gallup talks about is work is like a jazz band. Your team is like a jazz band. Know your role, know your instrument that you play, but listen to the rest of the band. And know when you should be, going at it with your solo, and know when to step back and let somebody else play their instrument. And I think we've already mentioned the psychological safety part of it, but leaders should build that safety on their team.
Mm-hmm.
So that if somebody is really good at something, they can raise their hand and say, I've got this.
Yes.
And if somebody is not so good at it,
yes,
they can say, help, please.
Right? It needs to be both sides of it, right?
Yes.
And
like, this is not my thing.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody on the team step up and help me here, instead of hiding and trying to do it and going on these Google searches and just raising your hand and saying, this is not me. Like,
yeah.
I'm not the person for this.
Yeah.
Help me.
Well, and that's I see that all as being functions of clarity. Mm-hmm. That as the leader, you have helped people filter through, and and they know that this is what they're strong at. This is where they may need support. Whether you talk about strengths or working genius or capabilities, whatever language you use, that everyone's clear about the skills that people possess, that the capabilities that they can develop, and that every part of that has a role to play in the shared success of the group. And there's no shame or false pride associated with any of that. That, maybe Christy is the person that's best at doing the work to build widget A, and I suck at it. Well, if it's not a core part of my job and I can be released from it, then, and we're not going to overburden Christy, let's let Christy be the person that does widget A. And Kate is really great at B, so we'll put her there. It's also getting clear about how does that band fit together well so that we can make something cohesive. That's what clarity is being able to connect things like, these are my employees' strengths with the guidelines established by policy and job description. Mm-hmm. And when you can mesh those, you have gotten clear about roles and expectations. There are two things you've talked about that I want to make certain I either highlight and or celebrate. The first is the practice of establishing, you called it a team charter. I've done exercises within TAC teams where we talk about team norms or agreements or commitments. That can be such a difficult task for people the first time they do it, because they can struggle with, well, we just do it. How granular should we get? Don't we already know this? They're not thinking about their work in those terms. They're just kind of existing. But the value of creating a shorthand for this is how we all do this stuff, I don't know if you can put like a price tag on that. I love hearing about a company that's vaguely local to me that has that built in to at least one of their functions.
It was something we established after COVID in the return to work. Yeah. When we had teams that were coming back in before we had set in office days of, let's agree on what days we're going to be together. Mm-hmm. So let's say we're all going to be together on Wednesdays. Let's say that we're going to do this work together, because it was very confusing to people of, why would I come to an office and be in an office where nobody else is? So we wanted to get people together on the idea of like, this is the reason we are together. Here's why we would come together. Here's what we can do that's better together. Mm-hmm. So that's how it all started. And we have found that it's helpful as we continue to meet with teams and they're running up against issues. Whatever the issue is with engagement, we can point back to the team charter and say, when's the last time you updated your team charter? Is this documented in your team charter? Because if they're saying, hey, we've got issues around teams feeling that this process is inequitable, or we've got issues around communication on our team, we'll say, okay, when's the last time you updated your team charter? What's the agreement? And we tell teams to update them annually, or if they've got a big influx of new folks coming onto the team, it's a good time to pull it out and make sure that everybody's still in agreement about those ways of working. Because I think I heard you talking in one of your recent podcasts about the storming, forming, norming, performing. I think I said those out of order, but new people joining the team, that's going to throw things for a loop. If you get 2-3 new people on a team, the ways of working are going to completely change the team.
It's also it's not just adding people, it's anytime there's a change within the team as well. Like if job functions change for some reason, or you've got an internal promotion, when the dynamics differ, you have to revisit, this is how we are together, because your circumstances have changed. So what worked before is essentially no longer relevant. Yeah. And that's an act of clarity, of recognizing that we go through a forming process that's not always signaled as such. And that as the leader, you need to be aware of what are the types of events that could cause a need to reform, and be proactive about addressing these things. It can even be something like, honestly, it can be something like, this employee is going out on paternity leave or maternity leave. Parental, that's the big word I couldn't think of in the moment. We're going to have a period of 6 to 12 weeks where we're redistributing that work. How do we adjust our expectations of each other during that? And then when our colleague returns, they're kind of a new person because they've been through this life-changing experience. And they're going to have different needs than they did before, and different concerns and external considerations. And it doesn't mean that we favor them, but we look at the fact that we have undergone a moment of transformation because of a change in one of our numbers live. Another activity that I always advocate for to help with clarification of roles and responsibilities, and even relationships on a team, I jokingly call it yours, mine, and ours. I think it's especially important for small teams where the leader may sometimes be a contributor, not just a director of activity, of getting really clear about what belongs to me, what belongs to you, what do we share, and what does that sharing look like? And it can be as simple as taking, a piece of paper and you guys writing it down at the same time, or it can be a facilitated activity with the help of like an internal resource, like a learning and development, a talent director, who walks you through that process. But taking the time to articulate, these are the scopes and boundaries and the ways that we do things, that investment makes you so much more efficient down the road. So yeah, it does take time, and you gain it back.
I think that is one of the hardest parts from the seat of talent development, is helping leaders to see that time investment now helps down the road. So as a leader, understanding about these different buckets of work, of leadership, management, and your work, because I get it, especially if you are a frontline supervisor, that is one of the hardest spots to be in, where we are asking you to do so much with so little time. So thinking about everything we're talking about here and investing the time in it, but trying to do these things to empower your team and empower the people around you, so that you are not constantly in problem solver, fixer mode.
Exactly.
I know coming out of individual contributor, that's the life you've led, of you've had a checklist. You've been in the role and probably gotten to where you are because you've been great at problem solving, at fixing, at checking things off a list. And that is what feels so good and feels so comfortable. And then all of a sudden you're in this spot with no or less clarity of, what do I do with my day? Like, I'm just supposed to like think and solve bigger problems, like not solve these small problems. Like, I've got to solve big problems. Right. And one of the things that, going back to my beginning example, one of the things I had to figure out was putting time on my calendar to think. Of like, I have to fix this, not fix, but I have to come up with a solution for X. And I have to give myself a deadline to come up with a solution for X.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to work with my leader and determine what my goals are. And I have to come up with a solution for X. Nobody is really going to hold me accountable of doing that, besides the fact that at the end of the day, my promotions, my merits and stuff are based on that. But there's not necessarily a client or anybody that's going to go call up my boss if I don't do that. It's more on me to do that. So I had to put time on my calendar to say, here are the projects I'm working on. Do this work.
Yes. Yeah. Time management or time budgeting, whatever we want to call it, is part of this equation. It just is. And when you enter leadership, you've raised a really good point. Part of your responsibility becomes thought work. And if you're used to being a highly productive team member, thought work is different. You know, we talk about trades, we talk about knowledge workers, tech workers. Thought work it's ephemeral in its nature. You rarely have a concrete thing to show for it, which one can be highly dissatisfying for some people. And two, there's some risk involved in high productivity cultures because, hey, I spent 8 hours thinking about something. I've moved toward a solution, but what do I have to show for it? And the answer sometimes is nothing other than what's going to come down the line. I do think as we become more AI integrated, thought work is going to become more prevalent. And that's something that leaders are going to have to learn to navigate, is that you may not see the same results, but are the results playing out over time when your people have the space to think about what they're trying to work and solve for.
Yeah. And thank you for consolidating the thought work idea for me, because that's where I was going with this. Of when you are trying to put together your team structure and figure out where your team is now, maybe what you need to add to your team, that's going to require thought work. When you're trying to figure out what your personal purpose is and how you translate that to the team, that requires thought work. So these are not things you're going to solve for tomorrow.
No.
You need to build time into your schedule.
Now, some of it you're going to become more conversant in. Your skill will increase, like connecting to purpose. Maybe the first month, the first year that you're in a new leadership position, it's effortful for you. But as time goes on and the purpose and the people become better known to you, that's not going to take you necessarily 3 hours on a Monday of thinking about how do I connect Jane's assignment to purpose. So again, if you invest now, what you're going to see is down the road gained efficiency, gained confidence, competence, all the good things that we want for ourselves and the people that look to us for leadership. Yeah. And I believe that clarity is a skill that sits under this idea of providing support. And we're talking about thoughts and kind of problem solving. How does that, in your opinion, connect to providing practical support in the day-to-day to employees?
I like the example. I'm going to go off the one you just started to give there with Jane. When we're talking to our team, giving clarity can be so helpful. So if I'm giving a project to somebody on my team, I'm not just going to hand over the project and say, hey, I need you to do these slides by this date. I'm going to say, hey, I want you to do these slides because you have a good understanding of engagement and you do a great job of putting together data in a way that our leaders understand. So I'm going to give clarity onto why I've picked that particular person for this project and the tie into why this project matters. So I'm going to give some background so it doesn't feel like I have given them another thing to do on top of the 20 things they're already trying to get done by the end of the day or the end of the week. So giving them that background is support. I think the other thing that clarity can do is one of the things you made me deep dive into is what's the difference between clarity and transparency.
Please move to it.
I dove into this because you had that question in some notes and I was like, what is the difference between clarity and transparency? Transparency, as I was looking into this, feels just like a dump of information. Like you are just giving people a bunch of what you know, but clarity is the organization of that information and leading people in a direction with that information. So one of the things I was thinking about with that is that a lot of times as leaders, you will get questions about topics you can't necessarily talk about. Whether it's somebody else's performance, merit questions, where you can't say, hey, so-and-so got this merit increase, you got this merit increase, or that, well, this person got termed because this, and this happened. But you can sit down and say, hey, I wouldn't talk about your personal situation.
Exactly.
So you would want me, you wouldn't want me going out and gossiping about your personal situation. So I'm not going to do it about this other person. But I can tell you what the process looks like. The process would look like this if we were having performance concerns. So I don't want you to be concerned that something is going to happen tomorrow and that you would get termed. This would, we would have this type of feedback in place. We would have a performance improvement plan. It's not going to happen for you tomorrow. What kind of questions or concerns do you have about the process?
I like that transparency being just like a data dump. Clarity, again, is a filter that you use and discernment about what is necessary and appropriate. It's not being paternalistic, being like, well, they can't handle this or they're not going to know what to do about this. It's no, their job scope is X. This is what's relevant. And when they need information, I will consistently provide it. I think clarity, again, it comes from a word that can mean light. So it's helping people direct their attention to the right things as opposed to making everything visible. Not in a way to manipulate people or circumstances, but to support people's success.
I'm wondering too, you mentioned AI earlier, and I'm a huge geek when it comes to everything AI.
Yes.
There's kind of two ways that AI has helped me with clarity. I'm information overload all the time. So one way it has helped me is to summarize and synthesize information. So when I went on my what is clarity versus transparency journey, I found probably 6 different articles. And I was like, summarize this for me. Give me one sentence telling me what the difference is, and then 5 bullets of what I need to know. So it brought it all down into one clear message. And then the other thing that, as I'm thinking about this, it helps with the what's in it for me. Of instead of just giving somebody a blank, or not a blank, a summary of an article. I can very easily summarize an article. One of the things I've been doing with it recently is, and we've been doing this for different departments too with internal emails, but it can review emails, it can review articles and say, how are different teams going to react to this message?
Okay.
So it can look at the, if you're sending out a company-wide email about a change in a policy, or I've got articles going in there and saying like, okay, here's this general update about something that's going on in the world of training. What does that mean for different departments? Because it's not all on me to make this change.
No.
How can the different departments apply this, and how do I explain it in language that's not language that I live in every day? How do I explain it in words that's going to make sense to them? So using AI to help drive that clarity to other teams.
That's a brilliant use case for change communication. It really is, because you have to think about how will this message hit with a variety of audiences. A significant change to one team may be negligible or not even noteworthy to another. So if I'm the leader who's communicating this to both teams, I can be a little blasé with Team B because this is just informational for them. Where Team A, this is going to rock their world and totally change how they work. I need to have a better strategy for that. And whether you use AI or a colleague, a trusted peer, having that discussion about how will this land with this population is making certain that you're clear up front about what the message is and the intent that you have.
I got it from a prompt writing course where they talked about putting in your emails, putting in, if you're doing a presentation, putting in your deck. So I use it for things like reviewing decks to make sure, is my key message clear?
Yeah.
What easy questions are like, what most common questions am I going to get? What are the hardest questions am I going to get? To make sure that, again, am I being clear in what I'm trying to say? You can do reviews, how different generations are going to respond in different ways.
Well, the whole debate about AI, I have a lot of conversations about AI in my home. My husband's in IT and he has very mixed feelings, where I'm like, I use ChatGPT and other AI tools almost every day as part of my workflow. I think you're talking about something that's very important, and I will connect it to clarity here, because leaders have to be clear about this is the purpose of AI use on our teams. The examples you've given, I love, because you're not using AI to generate ideas for you. Here is something I have created. It has a human source. I am using AI as a pattern recognition tool to validate the work that I've done, not to replace it, because it needs the human component, the thought that only a human is capable of still. And yet leaders are going to have to go through the exercise of purpose, team, mission when it comes to the addition of tools like AI. Because if we leave people in ambiguity too long, it's going to erode psychological safety, trust. It's going to amp up fear and stress, and you're going to see long-term negative impact on your teams.
I was just thinking about how many things it feels like we have to be very explicit about at work when we're building clarity. So whether it's, our AI usage, what dress code means, communication feels like it's a big one now. So what it means to communicate professionally. I have gotten so many requests for training on just basic business professionalism communication.
Yeah.
So having leaders be very explicit with their teams about what the norms are for the teams around expectations.
This is definitely a learning and development I'll go ahead and call it a pet peeve, the distinction between what is a training need and what's a management need.
Yes.
Have you explained what the expectation is around professional communication? Because if the answer is no, manager, then we're not doing training. You need to manage the situation. And that's, you can't. I've been with frontline managers, VPs, C-suite, who have all somehow embraced this idea that people should just know how to do their jobs. It's like, so did you know when you started? No, somebody had to tell you, and that's now your responsibility. And you don't have to tell them in a way that insults their professionalism, their intelligence, their abilities, but you have to have this mutual agreement. This is how we do this. Do you understand? I've proposed that there are essentially 3 facets to the skill of clarity, what leaders need to be clear regarding purpose, communication, and relationships. Do you believe there are any other facets that are vital to leading well with clarity?
I think that captures everything very clearly. I'm looking back at everything that I have written down. It really, purpose at the core of it is so important in making sure that you're all heading in that same direction, that you're not rowing in a circle, that you're not in that rowboat just spinning around. From a communication standpoint, like we talked, it's that green box to green box. You've got to make sure that you're closing the loop, that you're ending up on the same page. It's that trust, that psychological safety that the leaders are building up in these situations so that when there isn't clarity, somebody is raising their hand.
One of the questions you can ask yourself, leader, if you find yourself in that position is, was I clear that people have the right, the permission to talk?
Yes.
So if you find yourself in that circumstance, it may not be about your efficacy. It may be about your clarity. Did you make it clear to people that you encourage, you invite interaction with messages? Thank you so much, Christy. I appreciate you joining me today.
This was fun, and I have on my Four Non-Blondes What's Going On shirt. I didn't even mean to.
That's perfect.
To wear it.
It's perfect in so many ways for our Gen Xing selves and for our topic, because that is what people need to know what's going on. Listeners, the latest companion toolkit is now available. Please check the show notes for a link to request your copy. And if this episode was useful, you can support the show by following or subscribing on your preferred podcast platform, or by sharing it with someone who's navigating similar leadership challenges. We'll be back next Tuesday with a lesson for effectiveness, and later this season we'll explore the role and importance of accountability. If you want updates on episodes, resources, and upcoming offerings from 123 Limited, you can join the newsletter at any time. Thanks again for listening.